Hello, this is Jacqueline from Jack Knits, and as I'm filming this, it is nearing the end of July here in Michigan, the perfect summer weather. But it's not too late to grab a pair of knitting needles and some 100% cotton yarn and knit up this beautiful summer scarf. This is such a beautiful light and airy scarf I knitted with this very unique diagonal cluster stitch. So join me in knitting this scarf. It's going to be a fun, quick knit that you'll have in time for those end of summer cool nights that you need just a little bit extra warmth. So let's get started on this beautiful scarf. All right, so let's talk about how to do this stitch and how to incorporate into the scarf. I'm going to first show you how to do this particular stitch pattern. I'm calling it kind of a diagonal cluster pattern. It incorporates a wrap 3 stitch, which I will show you how to do that, and it produces this very lightweight, airy stitch pattern, perfect for a summer scarf. So after we review the stitch pattern, I'll give you some more specifics on the instructions to knit the scarf, but I will have full instructions and directions in the link below, pattern link below in the description, so you can follow along with that as well. And then we will wrap this up by explaining how to do this stitch in the round, because there is some differences when you knit this flat or when you knit it in the round, and I wanted to make sure you had complete instructions in case you wanted to incorporate the stitch in the round for another project that you might be doing. So we'll talk about that at the end of this video. So first, let's take a look at this particular stitch. Okay, this particular stitch pattern is a 4-row repeat, and I casted on for this scarf 38 stitches. Now that is a multiple of 3 plus 2. The multiple of 3 is to do the stitch pattern, and then the 2 additional stitches that I cast on are for a salvaged edge stitch that I'm doing on each end, and that produces this very clean, neat edge to my scarf. And if you want a video on how to do that nice clean salvage edge stitch, I'll have a link in the upper right hand corner. It's a very simple stitch that you do at the beginning and end of each right and wrong side row. So if you want to learn how to do this salvage stitch, I suggest watching that video. So I'm going to incorporate that technique into this scarf, so that's why I cast it on 2 additional stitches. So after I cast it on 38 stitches, I went right into the 4-row repeat for this pattern, and the very first row of this pattern is actually going to be purling all the way across. The first row is actually the wrong side of the pattern, and that is going to be all purl. So we're going to start by purling across. This last stitch on my needle is actually a slip stitch. That's why my yarn is not coming off from there, and that produces that salvage edge. But we're going to pick up that first stitch, purl it, and then we're just going to continue with that purl stitch all the way to the end of row number 1. Okay, I'm nearing the end of this row, and I'm going to knit up or purl up to that very last stitch, and then this last stitch I'm going to slip purlwise. So slip it off my needle purlwise, and that's going to give me that nice clean edge for my salvage stitch. I'm going to do that at the end of every wrong side row. Okay, now let's go over to the right side, and this is going to be row number 2, and this is the first row that we are using this wrap stitch. So here's how we're going to incorporate that. Our first stitch is our salvage stitch, so we are just going to knit that one, just regular. Then we're actually going to start our row by knitting 2. Okay, so just plain knit 2 stitches. That's not part of the repeat of the stitch pattern, but that's just what we're going to start this row with, is knitting 2. Now here comes the repeat for the rest of the row. We're going to start with a yarn over, so yarn over your right hand needle. Then we're going to knit 3 stitches. So knit 1, 2, and 3. And then we are going to take that first knit stitch we did of that 3 stitches, grab it with our left needle, and pass it over those other 2 knit stitches. Okay? So that is called the wrap 3. We're going to abbreviate that W3 in the pattern. So we did a yarn over, then we did that wrap 3 sequence, and that is the repeat that we're going to do now to the end of the row. So let's do that again. Start with the yarn over. Now do that wrap 3, which is 1, 2, 3 knit stitches, then grab that first knit stitch on your needle, so that third stitch in, and pass it over the other 2 stitches. Okay? So you'll know that this yarn over was actually an increase in stitch, but this wrap 3 was a decrease in stitch. So we do a yarn over for every single wrap 3 stitch we do, and our stitch count remains the same. Okay? So you're wondering about, if you're wondering about that. So here's another yarn over, so it's a stitch increase, and then our wrap 3, which is going to be a decrease. 1, 2, 3, and then wrap that third stitch over those other 2 stitches. Okay? Yarn over, 1, 2, 3, and wrap that stitch over the other 2. So let's do that to the end of this row, and then I will show you how to end this row. Okay? I'll continue. Okay, I'm nearing the end here, so let's do another one of those sequences, a yarn over, and then we're going to do 1, 2, 3 stitches, do that wrap over those 2 other stitches. Now I've got 2 stitches left. This end one is going to be our salvage stitch. I just really have 1 more stitch left, which I'm just going to do a knit 1. Okay, so end with a knit 1, then our last stitch, we're just going to slip it knitwise off the needle for that salvaged edge. All right, so that was the end of row 2. Let's now flip it over for row number 3. Row number 3 is exactly the same as row number 1. It's our wrong side of our pattern, so we are going to just purl all the way across to the end of this row. And you'll notice too here, as you probably noticed when I was doing row 1, that you've got these 2 stitches that are together that were those wrap 3 stitch, but make sure you knit each one of those separately, each one of them 2 stitches, and then you've got these yarn overs, but just purl those the same as well. So just purling those every single stitch, the yarn overs and those wrap 3 stitches. All right, so we'll do this to the end of this row. All right, as I'm getting to the end of this row, I'm going to remember to purl up to the last stitch, and then the last stitch I'm going to slip it purlwise. All right, that was the end of row number 3. So let's now do our final row, which is row number 4. And that is going to incorporate that wrap stitch again, but we're just going to reverse the sequence of our repeat. So again, we're going to start with just a knit stitch for our salvaged edge. Then we are going to just do only 1 knit stitch instead of 2, because we want to kind of offset our pattern. So we want to start a little bit earlier. So we want to kind of jog our pattern, and that's why we only want to now knit 1 stitch instead of 2 at the beginning of this 4th row. So just knit 1 stitch. Now we're going to do that wrap 3 and a yarn over, but we're switching the order of those. If you recall, on row number 2, we did a yarn over first and then the wrap 3. Well, now we're going to do the wrap 3 stitch and then the yarn over. All right, so let's do the wrap 3 first. So knit 3 and then pass that first knit stitch over the other 2 and then do the yarn over. Wrap 3 and a yarn over. Wrap 3 and the yarn over. So let's continue that to the end. You'll just want to make sure that you're doing that yarn over after each one of those wrap 3s, and especially at the end, we don't want to forget to do a yarn over at the end. So let's do this till the end, and I'll show you how to wrap up row number 4. Okay, I just completed my last wrap 3 stitch. Now I'm going to want to make sure I remember to finish that sequence with a yarn over. And now I've got 2 stitches plus the end stitch left, so the last 2 stitches are just going to be knit 2. And then the last salvage edge will be just a slip stitch knitwise. Okay, so that completed row number 4, and you'll see it's producing this lovely effect. So it's not a difficult stitch. The only thing that you really have to just kind of pay attention to and remember is which sequence you are doing on each row. Of course, rows 1 and 3 are all purl, so that's no problem, but rows 2 and 4, the row 2, you are starting with knit 2 and then a yarn over. Row 4, you are starting with just 1 knit stitch and you are doing the wrap 3 first. So just kind of pay attention and what your stitches look like so you have in your head which row you are on and which sequence you need to do for that particular row. That's probably the only trickiest thing about this stitch, is just kind of keeping track of which row you are on. All right, let's now talk a little bit about the specifics on how to incorporate this stitch into this summer scarf. So let's talk about the materials that I used. For this particular scarf, I used 100% cotton yarn. I used the Hobby Lobby brand Yarn Bee yarn. The color sequence, which is just a variegated color, very pretty colors, is called Nutmeg Nibbles. I am using a US size number 6 needle. I'm using a circular needle just to knit it flat, but you can of course use a set of flat needles as well. Now this is a nice summer scarf because I'm using 100% cotton. You can certainly knit this scarf for fall or winter as well, maybe using an acrylic yarn or wool yarn to make it a little bit more warm. It's up to you. So I casted on a total of 38 stitches for this scarf. That is a multiple of 3 stitches plus 2 for the salvaged edge. So you're going to want to make sure if you want to make a wider scarf, just add an additional stitch count, additional by multiples of 3, and then make sure you are adding 2 at the end. So your final count is always multiples of 3 plus 2. So after I casted on the 38 stitches from the start, I went right into the 4-row repeat for the stitch pattern, and then after I did that 4-row repeat a total of 12 times or 48 rows, then I just offsetted the pattern a little bit by doing 8 rows of garter stitch. You certainly do not need to do that. You can do the stitch pattern for the entire length of the scarf, but if you would like to break it up a little bit, I added some garter stitch rows. Okay. And then I just continued that pattern and kept going and going until I could wrap this scarf around me a couple different times, and then I seamed the edges together for a nice double cowl knit scarf. But you could leave it flat without seaming the edges for a nice long scarf that you just wrap around your neck. However you would like to do it will be beautiful, I am sure. So now let's take a look at how to knit this scarf or knit this stitch in the round. Okay, if you want to know how to do this stitch in the round, I am going to show you how to do that. The stitch sequence is a little bit different. When knitting this flat, we worried about the salvaged edge stitches on for the scarf or any other type of flat knitting. You do not have to do that with knitting in the round. Also, that knitting 2 and knitting 1 at the beginning and end of each round is not necessary either, but there are a couple things that we need to do to adjust the pattern because of this stitch count. So let me show you how to do that. I started here fresh with another swatch of yarn in the round. I just did a couple rows of garter stitch so I can start from the very beginning of the stitch pattern and show you how to start with row 1, and I'm going to show you actually the very first 8 rows so you're familiar with a couple setup rows and then the stitch pattern. Okay, row number 1, we don't really have a wrong side and a right side anymore. When we're knitting the round, we're always on the right side. So the other big change with knitting in the round with this pattern is that rows 1 and 3, which were purling all when we knitted it flat, are now going to be all knit stitches. So row number 1, and I've got a stitch marker here at the beginning of my round. So round 1, I should say, not row. Round 1 will be knitting all stitches. So let's do that all the way around this round. And again, this will be the right side, but we're always knitting with the right side facing us when we are knitting in the round. So let me knit to the end of this round. All right, I completed round 1, which was all knit. Now round 2 is going to begin that wrap 3 and yarn over sequence. Since we are knitting in the round, we don't have to worry about our salvaged edges or in starting or ending each row with a knit 2 or knit 1. So we're just going to jump right into the sequence. So I'm going to just start my sequence with that wrap 3 for row 2 or round 2. So 1, 2, 3 stitches. And then we're going to take that first knit stitch and pass it over those first 2 stitches, or those second 2 stitches, and that's our wrap 3. And then we're going to do the yarn over, okay? And then we're going to do another wrap 3. 1, 2, 3. Take that first stitch and wrap it over those next 2 stitches, and then a yarn over. Okay, so that's our sequence. We're going to do that all the way to the end of this round. Okay, as I'm nearing the end of this round, I just want to make sure you're remembering that we are doing a yarn over after each one of our wrap 3s. So I'm doing a yarn over after this wrap 3. My final wrap 3 stitches will be here, the last 3 stitches of the round. And then don't forget to do another yarn over at the very end of the round, and then we're going to slip our marker. Okay, so now round 3 is just like round 1, and that is again knit. When we did it flat, round 3s and round 1s were purls, but these are going to be all knit stitches. So again, we're going to just knit all of our stitches for round number 3. And I will do that quickly here and catch up with you at the start of round 4. Okay, at the end of round 3, where I knitted all my stitches, we are ready to begin round 4. And here is where it gets a little bit different from knitting it flat. If you see with the stitch, we are every other row or round, when we do those wrap 3s, we are doing it a little bit off from the previous wrap 3 stitches, so it's got this kind of checkered effect. So because of that, I have got to start row 4 with 1 knit stitch, so it offsets everything a little bit and shifts those stitches over a little bit. And also, because of this kind of a funny wrap 3 stitch where we're knitting 3 and then passing it over, sometimes that wrap 3 stitch is going to interfere, or our stitch marker, I say, is going to interfere with that stitch. So we at times have to shift our stitch marker from the left to the right a little bit at the end or beginning of some of these rows to accommodate that. But I'll show you exactly how to do that for each row. So here's one of those times where we're going to do a little shift in that stitch marker and also start our row with a knit stitch so it offsets those. So what we're going to do is remove our stitch marker for just a moment. We're going to now knit 1 stitch and now place our stitch marker here. And this is now going to allow the next row to work much more smoothly. But now we can start our sequence of wrap 3s and yarn overs, but this time, last time we started with the wrap 3 then yarn over, this time we are starting with our yarn over and then we're going to do the wrap 3. Okay, so each time you got to switch those sequences in the order in which you do those. So on this row we are starting with the yarn over and then the wrap 3. So that is what we're going to do all the way to the end of this round. Do the yarn over, wrap 3, and I'll meet you again at the end of this round. All right, I'm nearing the end of my round 4, and you'll see that I just have 3 stitches left. So I am going to start with a yarn over and then do that wrap 3 to finish up this round. And that will be the end because I'm right at my stitch marker, and that's why we moved our stitch marker last time, so I could end with that wrap 3 right at that stitch marker. Okay, so now we can switch that stitch marker over. We are now going to knit again row number 5, which is very similar to row number 1. Just knit all, except we're going to do again shift that stitch marker back to its original position when we get to the end of this round. So stay tuned to the end where I will show you how to shift that stitch marker once again. Okay, I am nearing the end of this all knit round, which is round number 5, and we want to shift that stitch marker back to its original position. So I'm going to stitch all the way to the very last stitch of this round. Then I am just going to slip that last stitch over to my right needle, remove this marker, slip that stitch back to my left hand needle, and place my stitch marker back on again. Okay, so now the stitch marker is in the original start of the round, and I can now move on to round 6, which is actually a direct repeat of round 2, which is starting with the wrap 3 stitch, and then doing the yarn over and doing that to the end of the round. Okay, so I won't go through the rest of these rounds because they're a repeat of rows 1 through 4. So round 6 is a repeat of row 2. Round 7 will be again a knit all round, and then round 8 will be a repeat of row number 4. So don't worry if you didn't get all of this. I will have all of these instructions in the description below on how to do this knit stitch in the round, also how to do it knitted flat with those additional knit stitches and selvage edge stitches at the beginning and end of each round. So I hope you found this helpful and you found the stitch to be very pretty and fun to use. I think it will make just a really lovely scarf. I'm excited to get this done and show you. It's going to be a beautiful summer scarf, perfect for those late summer evenings when it gets cooler in the evening time. So if you like what you see here, don't forget to subscribe. I do videos all about knitting tips and techniques, show fun new stitches and creative patterns, so hope you follow along and subscribe. Until then, happy knitting. Thanks for watching, everyone.